Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a couple seconds to allow attendees to join this webinar. Well, hello, my name is Anna, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Constituent Relations to welcome you all to this 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, we would just like to inform you that this session is being recorded and it will be available on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. Once it's posted, please feel free to share this with anyone, a friend, fellow alumni, or someone that you think would benefit from this chat. We also encourage you to utilize the Q&A box or the chat box to submit questions for our guest speaker. My colleague Rosalinda will be helping moderate the chat during this webinar. And now I would like to introduce our alumni host, Carlos Hernandez. Welcome. I'll start off by reading your bio before we jump in. So Carlos Hernandez is a lifelong learner who enjoys acquiring new skills to enhance his career as an educator, match operations staff in professional soccer, and a soccer match official. Prior to becoming a school counselor, he completed a master's program in tourism, hospitality, and recreation management at Cal State Northridge. Additionally, he also obtained his bachelor's degree there with a double major in Central American Studies and psychology. He's also received his counseling credential at Cal State Long Beach recently in 2023. Since 2013, Hernandez has balanced his life as a family man, educator, and soccer referee. As an educator, he works with families and students to navigate the school system in Los Angeles. Through soccer, he has officiated several competitive matches at the amateur, high school, and collegiate levels. In match operations, he has worked soccer matches as a referee liaison officer for Los Angeles Football Club, Angel City Football Club, FIFA, and other international competitions throughout Los Angeles. He is constantly redefining himself as a person who is living a passionate life, doing things he enjoys around loved ones, while everything else falls into place. Carlos, thank you so much for being here today and welcome. Feel free to reference anything I may have missed in that very exciting bio you have.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for inviting me in, and thank you for the space and opportunity to be able to pick my brain. I call this opportunity, and I wish, we would have that all the time to be able to pick people's brains because they have a lot of information to share. But we would never know what they have inside until we kind of like ask them and, do that. So I hope to answer people's questions or at least provide them with some information, some tips, some tricks, so they can adapt that to their needs.
Yeah, and before we were on, you were kind of mentioning the photo we used of you to help promote your industry chat had a belt. Can you explain what that belt was? I don't know if you have it next to you. You could share. Okay, you have it. Very,
Yes.
very cool. What is that belt?
It's show and tell now. Okay, welcome to my show and tell. For this, I have this title. So if I can see it, I don't know if you can see it. But pretty much it is a school counseling title. So literally and figuratively. So my family knows that I love wrestling, right? So I
Uh-huh.
used to follow a lot of WWF. Now it's called WWE. And when they won this championship, it was like the biggest thing for them. They're like, oh, this is the new champion, right? And so my family calls me the family champion because I wasn't supposed to go to college. I ended up going to college. I got 1 degree. I got 2 degrees. I ended up getting a third degree, and now I have fourth degree. And so this school counseling title is
Amazing.
it's kind of like a championship, that I was able to get to it. And I was just telling you, like during sometimes I take it out during supervision. I'm a school counselor and I have to, watch the kids play the yard or in the restroom area and that kind of thing. And I just carry this around with me, and then it's sort of like an icebreaker right away. Like if a student likes boxing or wrestling, they go up to me like, Mister, did you box? Did you wrestle? Like, how'd you get this title? How'd you win it? Can I touch it? And so that's when I explained to them, well, you have to earn it, you have to go to school and maybe you can get one, your family gets you one, so it's a
I love that.
memorable experience, to finish graduation, and it makes me at least I feel very unique to be one, if maybe a few of the counselors who have a school counseling title. I don't know if any other counselor is out there
Yeah.
walking around with a title, but I am.
Yes, yes, I love that. And it's a, great way to motivate the students to finish, school, maybe get a higher education, so that way they can get their own title belt. So I love that. Okay, well, kind of now jumping into some questions. And again, as a reminder that for those that are attending, feel free to drop some questions in the chat and we'll make sure to bring that up in the conversation so Carlos can help answer any questions you have. So first question is, can you just tell me more about your experience of and what led you to Cal State Long Beach to receive your degree?
Well, it's a long story, and it'll probably take 2 hours to explain in a summary, but I would tell you the
Cliff Notes.
concise response. Yes. It came down to thinking about my family. So I'm a family guy. I love my family, and I have to think what's best for my family. Shout outs to my wife Nancy, who's out there, and my kids, Susana, Araceli, and Litzel. They're my inspiration, and they're the reason why I chose to go to back to school. I actually was an educator before. I used to work with parents. I used to be the family and community engagement specialist. I used to work for
Mhm.
Anaheim Union High School District, and I love my job. But it got to a point where I reached a plateau in terms of my
Mm,
income, in terms of my experiences. I couldn't go any further because I didn't have a credential. And they said, Mr. Hernandez, maybe you can be an administrator, or you can be a teacher or a counselor or something. And I said, yeah, like tell me, how do I get started? And they're like, well, you have to go back to school. And I'm like, I thought I was
mm,
done with school. I finished in 2013 and I said, I have to go back to school. And so I had to sort of research, find out how I can get my credential. So I was really looking around, trying to get the school counseling credential. It's called the PPS credential, the Pupil Personal Services credential. And that's what you need in order to be a counselor or be a psychologist or be someone who works with students. That's not a teaching credential. And so
mm,
I researched into it. I found Long Beach to be the site that was perfect for me. I live in LA or Los Angeles, and I was going to work in Anaheim, and so I sort of made a triangle figure in my
yeah.
map, and I said I can do that. I can drive. I don't mind driving. I drive a lot as a referee. I get an assignment, and I know the cities. I know the
Mhm.
traffic flow, and I said, you know what? If it's a sacrifice I have to make, I will make it. And actually, fortunate for me, if you want to look into the silver lining, we were in a pandemic and we were going hybrid right at the time. And
Yeah.
so it really worked for me. In 2021, I looked into it and it was like half in person, half
Mhm.
online, and it just worked. And so I never in my wildest dream said one day I will have two master's degree, but I ended up getting
Amazing.
it to get that credential. And so it really came down to a family decision where I needed to make more money. I needed to look into how can I increase my salary, right? How can I make be a provider for my family? And the opportunity came for education. I consulted with my wife. We're a team. We make decisions together. Our family mantra
Mhm.
is team can. And I can talk about my little company that I created, which is like an not an LLC, but it's sort of like I am an employer. I have a federal employer ID number because it's my family belief, to have this. It's called Team Can. And so when I started, it was Nancy and I, and so we're like Carlos and Nancy. We're like Team Can. And over the years, we've had kids, and so we name it with the letter A to keep the Team Can name alive.
Yeah.
So
It's very
so
long, eh? Yeah.
yes, exactly. So Team Can decided that it was best for Carlos to go back to school, and so my wife supported me throughout the way. She encouraged me.
Amazing.
It was sleepless nights sometimes writing essays and reading, and them taking care of the girls. My mother-in-law, my mom.
Hmm.
It's a family and community effort.
Yeah, it
And so I
takes a
ended up
village.
exactly. It's a village effort, and at the end, I had to get that in order for me to um, go to the next level, which is the counseling. And so I did experience being a teacher before. I had 2 years of experience, and I said, you know what, let me try counseling, and it was just a perfect fit. And then I found out later on that in order for me to get into the school counseling program at Cal State Long Beach, it was a very competitive process. But luckily, I had a lot of experience as an educator in other capacities that made me
Hmm.
a better candidate. And I was also a little scared. I was an older student coming back, and I said, man, like, there's students that are like in school, and so there it's gonna be easy for them to do the schoolwork. How am I gonna go back to like creating those routines? But once an educator or once a student, you're always a student. And I strongly believe in lifelong learning. and I never stop learning. I never stop being a student. I'm always a student of the game or a student of education, and I always believe, that everyone has something to show you. You just gotta, have open ears and open eyes to learn from them, because sometimes it'll be very explicit. They tell you this is the
Mhm.
lesson, and other times they'll just show you, and then you have to be like, oh, that was a lesson. That's what this person taught me. So.
Yeah. And so with that, can you kind of explain more about what that program was like? How long did it take you to complete? And then if there was any professors or were you, did you do any extracurriculars during your time while you were even at campus with, that little time that you had?
Time management to the max, time management on
Hmm.
steroids. We all get 24 hours. My mom tells me this, at times, when people ask her, like, how does your son do it? And she says, you know what, Carlos, since he was a young man, he just managed his time. Within 24 hours, I was able to, get the hours of sleep. I was able to get the family time, and I was able to get the scholarly time that I needed. At a point that I had to stop working, right? Because I had to get internship. So I have to do that.
Hmm.
So I stopped doing work, and so my family supported me, and I did other things like refereeing or doing match operations in order to
Hmm.
create some income, but it wasn't as much of an income, right? And so I just tried
Right.
to be a student, something that I believe in a lot is to do things with passion or stop doing them. That's what my grandma taught me, and it's a thing of doing the best that I can at that capacity, and once I don't have a passion for it or I don't want to do anymore, then I stopped doing it, because she says that your energy gets passed on, right? So
Right.
if I don't have that energy to do it, then I don't. And thinking about the program and the way it worked, it was 2 years. It could have been three if I continued with the thesis that I was working on, but I stopped doing it after a year and a half, because I said I need to finish in 2 years. I need to go back to being an employee, right? I need to make the income. I can't be a student for the rest of my life. And so it was a very quick program, very intensive. I would recommend to anyone, but at the same time, you have to be um, very real with yourself. And if that's the commitment you want to make, you have to like fully commit. I wouldn't recommend being halfway in it. You have to be
Hmm.
all in pretty much, because it does require a lot. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without my professors. So shout out to the school counseling program professors. Special shout out to Dr. Olson, who really like mentored me. He was my mentor for the thesis, and he really understood my role as a parent, as an educator, and as a student, and he really supported me with all my decisions. I never felt that I couldn't go to him, if that makes sense. It was a
Yeah.
male to male, it was a teacher to student. Everything, like all the roles really made sense, and I wouldn't have been able to go through the program without his support.
Oh,
So
that's
shout out to
amazing.
him. And then
Yeah.
within the program, I also participated in the School Counseling Student Association. So that was
Okay.
something that I stayed connected. You were asking about time. I don't know if
Hmm.
I managed that time, but little bit of time that I had, I did participate as a treasurer. It was a new challenge for me. I never done that before, and I don't think I'm the best person handling money, but the need was there, and I said, you know what?
Yeah.
I've been in other school programs, or extra
Uh-huh.
activities, so let's give it a shot. And I didn't feel the connection, because it was like online, it was hybrid. So I said maybe this will make me
Right.
feel a little more connected, and that's why I did it.
Yeah, and a great way to network and just meet other, like-minded people who are going through that program because you guys can also help each other out, going through those, coursework, find a study buddy, that kind of thing. So yeah, especially whenever you mention that whole hybrid, studying, sometimes you don't feel like you get that type of college experience. So
Hmm.
that was awesome. You're able to squeeze in the little amount of time you had to join that club. Well, okay, and I know you kind of explained a little bit more about how you got into being a school counselor. And so now, with you being a school counselor since receiving your degree, how do you help families navigate complex school systems and resources at the school that you're at?
Well, I'm at Carver Middle School, which is in South Central Los Angeles. And as I was telling you, I was giving you the tour, right? I was walking into
Hmm.
my room. We're having difficulty with the key, so I used my computer to kind of show you around. It is a 125-year-old school, so it has a lot of
Amazing.
history, right? And resources are there. You just have to sort of put them in order, or know exactly what students and families need. So it's almost like constantly asking them for like a resource or like a needs assessment almost, find out
Okay.
what you need. And then from there, I sort of am the liaison or the link between the school and the community services. And I don't, I cannot take full credit. I'm not the counselor that knows it all, but I tell them, my philosophy in life, it's really like, I don't have the answer for you, but I know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that can give us an answer. And maybe that other person can
Love
connect us
that.
with an answer. So it's about, networking is about, supporting them. And I don't believe in like you need shoes here, size 9. And it's like, but actually I need sandals, and I try to give them the
Mm-hmm.
resources that they need, So I always ask questions. And maybe this is something that I've learned in the past with from the Right Question Institute, where you always want to be open to questions and ask, ask, ask. And once you have a sort of like result, then you can go into this is what they need. You can't just assume that people need
Mm-hmm.
based on what you see or based on what they tell you from the beginning, right? You kind of have to get a full
Right.
story. And so I help
Yeah.
them navigate that. And I don't assume anything. I don't think that they know it or they don't know it. I just say, do you know this? Or you want me to show you this? And then I walk them through it. And my whole philosophy or my whole like process is that I want to do it for them one time so they can see. Then I want for me to see them doing it. And then once I know that they can do it, then I kind of like say, okay, well, now you know, and please pass the information to other people that because now you can pass it on, right? And I also work with a team. Like I said, I can't take full credit. So I am the school counselor, and I can help you with academic resources. I can help you with tutoring services, connect you with teachers, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to community, I have to connect with our community person. When the resources, I have a resource navigator. If it's a topic that I'm not really an expert in or I don't feel much comfortable in, I reach out to colleagues that have more information. And so it's all about networking and
Yeah,
supporting one
helping
another.
be a guide. Yeah. Love that. And so how do you build trust with students and families from, diverse backgrounds and maybe even socioeconomic backgrounds too?
Well, that's when that's when I started going to school. First, I wanted to be a math teacher, so I went into school to be a math teacher. And after 2 years, I realized that you know what, I want to work with people and I want to understand people and their upbringing and their
Mm-hmm.
background. But in order for me to do that, I need to do it for myself, right? And so I am of Central American descent. I was born here, but I grew up in Honduras. And growing up in Honduras, it's a different culture. And even though I'm
Mm-hmm.
Latino and I speak Spanish, there's certain terms that are not translated the same way.
Right.
And so I kind of have to be understanding of that, maybe we speak the same language, Spanish, but
Mm-hmm.
different cultures, different beliefs, right? And I have to sort of be uh a referee. Like I have to be arbitrary, right? I have to make a decision, but I just kind of have to think, what do they need? And I have to sort of like practice something that will be culturally sustaining to them because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to think that, oh, you have to do it this way because this is the way the counselor tells you. It's more like this is an option. And if you want to do this, you're the adult, you make the decision. I tell students, look, you have A, B, and C. I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you
Right.
were to ask me, if I was me, I would probably choose this, and that kind of give them the
Be more of a guide.
it's like a guide, exactly. Not like a direct response, but it's more like these are your options. Pick, see what your pros and cons are, and then make a decision because I want them to also have that accountability and ownership for their own
Right.
decision.
Yeah. And so, what are some valuable skills you think you've developed throughout your entire career that are really useful for people in this type of industry?
Um, I mean, skills, it's a wide range of skills. I'm trying to think of, what would be the number one skill. It's almost thinking of resourcefulness. I think the skill that
Mm,
I learned is how to be resourceful. And I was thinking, I'm like, where did I get this from? And I'm trying to connect, like how did I come up with resourcefulness? Where did I see this? Where did I read about it? And it took me back to my mom. Mhm. I'm here today, right, in a space where it's a lot of books, it's a library, and it's very fitting because that's what my mom used to do for us. We went through very hard times when I was a kid, and I had to connect with my mom. I grew up with a single mother, and so she was the one who brought us the resources. She reached out to school and
amazing.
say, I need these resources. There was a time where we had everything. We had a house, we had everything, and then in 2 hours, the sheriffs came and they took everything away from us. And so I learned to adapt to the needs of the times,
Hmm.
the zeitgeist almost, it's like the spirit of the time is that you have to be ready and you have to adapt and you have to, otherwise you're gonna be left behind. And so having that skill of being resourceful, I learned it from her. And interestingly enough, she would take us to the library. I didn't have a computer, so we'll go to the library and work on my essays. At the time, you had to print the final version, right? You would write all these versions and you
Yep.
have to type in and then print the last one. So I would use that printer, or the internet was coming around to do research or encyclopedias. She bought us encyclopedias, and she was always very resourceful in a lot of ways. And she was always, and
Who's your
I just,
champion?
excuse me?
She was your champion,
She
helping
was
you
my
through it.
champion, yeah, and it was that belief of serving. It was always not about like I do this because I'm expecting this, more like just serving because people need support, and then
Hmm.
asking for help when you need it, and just kind of like think of the best in people. And it's almost like what I do as a counselor. I
Yeah, full circle.
it's a career that I should have done 20 years ago, and I didn't. And I don't regret it because I gained so many other skills that I've been able to adapt. People ask me like, why did you choose Central American Studies? Well, I said I want to learn about myself first. I want to learn about Central American Studies. And then why psychology? Well, I want to learn how to work with people and why are people's behaviors this way. And then why
Hmm.
did you go into your master's in tourism and hospitality and recreation management? Well, I said, I have a degree in serving people, and I love sports. And I said, the opportunity came for me to interview with the chair of the department, and I asked him like, what are my chances of me coming into the program? And I showed him what I had done in my past, right? I was a student senator. I was the co-founder for the club team at Northridge, and I had all these background that I already did the sort of like the practical experience. So I needed the theoretical experience. And they gave me
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity. And so everything that I've done in my life is sort of like full circle in
Yeah,
the
falling
sense
into
that
place.
I get the skills and then I adapt them. So instead of thinking of athletes, I think of students. Instead of thinking of coaches, I think of teachers. Instead of thinking, about the attendees to my soccer event, I think about the parents that we're serving, right? And so it's just thinking of skills as an asset, and sort of like looking at people as on an asset-based approach, that you see what they have, not what they need. And so based on what they have, I kind of give them the resources and tools so they can be better.
Yeah, and then with, kind of sharing all that information, are there some misconceptions that people have about school counselors or any myths, that you like to debunk?
The name, I mean, it comes down to the name, just the name itself. People sometimes call us guidance counselors, sometimes call us academic counselors, sometimes call us, the scheduler, right? Scheduler
Mm,
counselor. And it's really more than that. Counseling we're educators, first of all, right? And we develop skills for others. We're advocates, and we allow others to also be self-advocates. We also are leaders. We're leaders on campus, right? And I believe I'm a servant leader. I love to help people and lead by example, and doing it together. um and so, something that I want to debunk, if I can, in this space, is that there's more to counseling than just being a guidance counselor, being academic counselor, or being a scheduler. We're school counselors, and school counseling requires you to focus on the academics. It requires you to focus on the social emotional aspects of students,
hmm.
and it requires for you to focus on the post-secondary planning. And so really that's the three things that I focus on. And when I look at a family, I don't look at them for the academics only. I also look at what resources do they have, what assets do they bring, and how can I help them so that they can be better in their post-secondary planning, but at the same time looking at how social emotional aspects are affecting them. How can you tell someone go to college and do these things when they're telling you, Mister, like I don't have money, I don't have this, right? So we have
Yeah.
to meet them where they're at and provide them with resources and tell them this is what you can do. This is the way I did it. This is the way someone else did it, and then giving them sort of like a route or
Like,
like options that they
yeah,
can.
tools for their journey, essentially, along the way.
Exactly. And it has to be fitting for them. Now, what worked
Hmm.
for me, right? It maybe worked for me because that's my mom was very resourceful. She was helpful, right? Other parents may not be as supportive, right? So I have to sort of like tell them, these are some things you can do, but you do need an adult to support you. And you kind of have to be, you have to, it's interesting because I never thought about my dad as much as I think of it now, because my kids ask me like, how is it not having a dad? And I said, it's kind of like having your ABCs in a wooden, um, toy, and you sort of see that letter A, and you see the letter A there, and you place it, and you see a letter B, and you place it, and then you see the letter C, and then you don't find the letter C, so you have to look around, and then you get the letter U, and then you kind of twist it a little bit to make it fit into letter
Hmm.
C. But then there's also that gap in the letter U that you just took away, right? So not having a parental support or family and community engagement is sort of finding the gaps and finding ways to sort of make up for that gap. And so,
Hmm.
if you don't have the
Great
dad,
analogy.
yeah, thank you. And I'm much into analogies, right? It's like as a counselor, I have to teach people, like, I'm trying to give you a message and this is what I'm gonna use, right? And so
Yeah.
I told my daughter, it's like that's how I feel. She asked me like, how do you feel about not having that? And I said, I use my uncles, I use my coaches, I use my teachers
Hmm.
to be sort of like the parental or the male figure for me to learn how to be a parent. And now I get to be a parent, but I had to learn from that. And I did have a
Great.
stepdad, and I did learn some, things from him, and I copied the good things, and then the things that I didn't like from him, I didn't replicate them, right? And so it's a lot of that. And when I talk to my students, I see myself in them, and I also see, what they have and what they bring, and how can I help them sort of like help them navigate to their needs and to their spaces.
I love that. Very, very full circle journey, that you're on that path with them from freshman to, as you mentioned, post-secondary with their plans on what they're going to do after high school. So it's a lot of great work that you do as a school counselor with
Thank
many hats, sounds like.
you.
And so now kind of, moving to maybe more of your soccer officiating, how did you kind of first get involved? I know you mentioned you did some of it as a way to kind of make, some supplemental income while you were getting your degree at Cal State Long Beach. Is that when you kind of started getting into it, or, how did you kind of start that journey?
Oh, I have to think back to 2006, really. I was passing by at an orientation event at Cal State Northridge, and somebody threw me a basketball. And I don't know, they thought I was athletic. I don't know why, but I got the ball, and I was like, hey, and then I threw it back. He's like, would you like to be a ref for us? I was like, referee? Like, I never even considered going to school and then, not even consider refereeing. I was like, I can come to
Hmm.
school and referee? Like, and I was like, tell me more. What does that take?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you can make money. If you have financial aid, it could be like paying through financial aid, like student work, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, I don't know, let me see. And then at the same time, I had already interviewed, or I was planning to interview for an office position.
Hmm.
And this is something unique. I don't know if other students have done it. I'm sure they have, but I was one of those unique cases where I was getting two types of work through financial aid. So 10 hours of my hours were in the office. I used to work for the CSUN EOP admissions. So that's
Okay.
the Education Opportunity Program.
Hmm.
And my other time was refereeing and scorekeeping for AS Rec and doing intramurals. So they had those
Oh,
games in the
nice.
evening and the
Yes. I
fraternity,
worked at the
sorority.
intramurals desk at Cal State Long Beach. So yeah, familiar with the referees. Yeah,
Yes,
I love
so
that.
that's how I got into it. By that basketball, threw it back. They thought I was athletic. They thought I could help, and I said, okay, sure, I'll
Yeah.
get into it. I started refereeing basketball, soccer, volleyball, ultimate frisbee, flag football. I mean, you name it, right? Scorekeeping,
Hmm.
all of those things too. But soccer was always my passion. I always loved soccer, and soccer. It runs in my blood. My master's degree is tourism, hospitality, and recreation management with an emphasis sports as it applies to soccer. So everything that I did, it was like a soccer restaurant, soccer league, soccer tournament, and I always had that. And the interesting fact that I will share with you is that I call my grandma. She's in Honduras, and I'm like, "Hey, grandma, guess what? I'm working as a referee, and you know what? I'm thinking about this career. I'm gonna be a soccer player, a soccer referee."
Uh-huh.
And she says, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be the first one in the family to be a soccer referee." And then she tells me, "Your grandpa was a soccer referee."
Wow.
Like what? So it runs in my blood, in my blood, right? In my veins.
That is
I have a
amazing.
family who's a soccer family. My uncle was actually like an organizer, like a team captain, team administrator for a team. So I knew how to
Hmm.
like, bring people together for the team. And when I was in first grade, they asked me to be the director of activities, and I said, why don't we have a tournament? Let's have first graders play against second graders, and third graders play against fourth graders. And I brought my
Oh, that's so
uncle's
fun.
uniform to play. You had first
Yeah.
wearing like adult size uniforms, and it was a blast. And so I got into refereeing by doing that, and over the years, I sort of developed more skills, and
Hmm.
like I said, I was doing all sports in the beginning. I was in school from '06 to about 13, but I was a referee from '06 to 11. But I really
Hmm.
started with soccer in '08. That's when I said, 2008, I said, I really want to look into a career to be a soccer referee. What do I need to do? With the club team, I had to call the away team. I had to call the referees and everything. And one day I asked this guy, like, hey, like, you're a soccer referee. How do you get into it? And it's a funny story. I pretty, when they say jump in the water in the deep end, and if you
Yeah.
sink or swim, that's what happened to me. I told him, hey, you know what? I want to referee. I have this experience, but I haven't done it. He's like, oh, I'll take you. Let's go to a class.
Yeah.
So I went to the class. The funny thing is that in Spanish, his name is Gio, right? So I would say Gio, Gio, and the assigner, the people who give you the games, he thought I was calling him Tío, which is like uncle in Spanish. And so I would say, hey, Gio, what is this? And then, Gio, ¿qué es esto? Yeah, and then so he's like, okay, here are the assignments. And it will be like a little spreadsheet, or it was a spreadsheet, but they will cut it, but your name, and then they will tell you, here's your assignment. And so my first assignment was to do a semi-pro semifinal game with a FIFA referee
No
and
pressure.
10, 10-year-old experienced referee. Yeah, no pressure. Oh yeah, yes. And then here's this guy who's like his first game. I mean, I did intramurals and I did all these
Yeah.
games before, but I had never done organized soccer. And so I said, what do I have to do? Like, why did they give me this game? So I went to the signer. I was like, excuse me, I think you made a mistake. Like, I shouldn't be in this game. Like, no, but that's where your uncle's going. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, your uncle. And I was like, no, he's not my uncle. He's Gio. He's my friend. He's like, oh, I thought you were saying Tío. They were saying he's your
That
uncle.
is so
So
funny.
that was my first assignment. My first assignment was Simon Bolivar. The league doesn't exist anymore, but it was a semifinal game for a semi-pro. So you had two very competitive teams. And I can tell you more about that experience, but pretty much I swam apparently because I was able to
That's
get through that game, and then I had
Yeah, you
another.
survived. You're still doing it, so it sounds
I'm still
sounds
doing it.
like you did something right.
Yes, yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, you now are going to be helping with FIFA, which kicks off in just a few days. And so you're going to be a referee with them. How did you end up with that amazing opportunity? And have you been doing any work to help prepare you for that?
Well, just to clarify, I am not going to be officiating the games. I am the FIFA referee liaison officer. So
Okay, okay.
to explain that I know it's kind of difficult to explain, but to make it easier, I'm like the hospitality chair for the referees. I am sort of like their local venue liaison. I
Hmm.
help them with anything they need. And so I am not a FIFA referee. I just happen to be assigned to be the referee liaison officer for Los Angeles. And so the way that works is that they assign the referees and they tell me
Hmm.
these are the referees. I have to coordinate transportation to make sure that I get them to the place they need to go. And then I answer any questions they may need. And my whole job really is to make sure that they don't worry about anything else that is outside besides the game. They already have enough to take care of, which is the match, right? It's a very high intensity match. And I just to make sure that everything else runs smoothly. So if they need something like, hey, we need to make sure we have this in the locker room, or we need to make sure that we get to this place on time. I coordinate
Hmm.
transportation, I do all that. And it really started, back in 2013. I was in refereeing, we make a joke. We say that sometimes the best ability is availability. So sometimes you just have to be available. And it came up, that my one of my supervisors was a referee, like what do you call it? It's like someone who watches the game and kind of like an observer and provides feedback,
Hmm.
an assessor, referee assessor. And so they kind of they were the assessor for that game. It was a professional match. It was Chivas USA against Colorado back in April of 2013. And he calls me and he says, Carlos, would you be available to cover Julio for this game? I knew Julio because he was the referee liaison for that venue, which was called it's called Dignity Health Sports Park now, but at the time
Oh,
it
right. It
was
used to
Home
be like
Depot
also Home
Center.
Depot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So at the time, he was the guy, but for some reason the coach didn't want to see Julio. There was something that happened, and I had done the referee liaison role for amateur games, Open Cup and other amateur games. And so I said, "Wow, I'm getting this opportunity to cover Julio like a professional soccer match. Sure, I'm more than honored to do it." And so I started it, And then they said, "Can you cover the season? Like, can you cover the 2013 season?" I said, "Yeah, I'm more than happy to do so." And then I thought, you know what? It's over. I'm not gonna get any more assignments. Julio's the guy here in LA, and I don't want to
Yeah.
compete against Julio. He's a mentor. He taught me the ropes, about how to do this role. So I said, that was it. And then in 2014, I get a call. It's like, "Carlos, you were the liaison for Chivas USA. Can you cover a Central American Cup? Salvador and Honduras are gonna play this. There's like two games, so it'll be you and this other guy and helping the referees." And I said, "Wow, like I get to be a liaison for like an international game. Sure, I'll do it." And then in 2015, I get a call again for CONCACAF Gold Cup, and they said, "Can you do the liaison role?" And from that experience, I'm like, "Wow." Just
It's
just
just a
like that, I
ripple
have three
effect.
years of experience under my belt, and then I'm doing international matches. And then in 2017, I got a call from Pro, which is the professional referee organization, and they want me to be the liaison for LAFC, which is the BMO Stadium in
Hmm.
Los Angeles, right? And so I started working with them in 2018, and then in 2022, I started working with Angel City. And so over the years, I've had 13 years now of experience, 10 seasons or more, right? And FIFA opportunity came last year actually. My thinking about networks, right? I was working with someone at the stadium at BMO. They ended up moving to Rose Bowl, and they said, "Hey, Carlos, can you cover a game this summer?" And I said, "Yeah, like when?" They're like, "Oh, it's actually for the FIFA Club World Cup." I was like, "Whoa, you want me to cover a game for the FIFA Club World Cup?" Like, yes, of course. And so they referred me to FIFA. I went through the interview process. And it was really like it was networking, but it's also like you have to have a resume, right?
Read
You
that
have to build your own
experience.
experience, right? And so they looked at my experience. They're like, "Wow, you've been doing this for 10 years." And I said, "Yeah, like I never considered this to be a career." And it just
Right.
happened to be. And that's how kind of like the opportunities come. You have to be ready for anything.
Hmm.
And something that I strongly believe in is that you're not too big or not too small for any assignment. The people place you in an assignment or in a role because they trust in your abilities. And
Yes. Yeah.
if you're not ready, they're gonna train you, and they believe that you're adaptable and that you're coachable. And something that you have to be ready is you never know. The time may come at 1 a.m. in the morning. They may need you to be ready. And like I said, the best ability is availability. Sometimes you just need to make yourself available. And maybe I did have other plans that Saturday with family or with friends or something, but I made that a priority because my mentor
Mm-hmm.
was the one who gave me that chance. And I said, when is that chance gonna come again?
Right.
And imagine if I would have said, "No, I don't want to do it," or like, "Oh, you know what? No, I can't do it." Maybe that opportunity would have never come again. And then maybe I wouldn't be here today talking about how I am the FIFA referee liaison officer. So it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
happen, and you just kind of like embrace
Right
it.
place, right time. Yeah, all of those. But yeah, very good point where even though if it might seem small, you don't want to pass up on those because again, it just sounded like your experience where they were just all those stepping stones that got you to those bigger and bigger opportunities, which sometimes people don't see that, the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. But, if you just stay persistent with it, yeah, those and the networking, as you mentioned, great way to
Well,
just stay connected.
and that's the thing that sometimes people ask me or students ask me like, "Mister, how do you get it?" And I said, "Well, life is not only about who you know, life is also about who knows you." And
Mm-hmm.
so you can say like, "I know the mayor," and it's like, "Okay, you know the mayor, but does the mayor know who you are?" And so
Very
some
good
I know
point.
another analogy, not to bring an analogy, but it's like I always tell students, you have to keep your name as clean as a whistle because your name has to be brought in with positivity. Like when
Mm-hmm.
they think about Carlos H. Hernandez, when they think about me, they think about strong work ethic. They think about somebody who is there on time, somebody that is gonna be reliable, somebody that's resourceful, somebody that's gonna be able to troubleshoot whatever comes in their place, and they're gonna do it with their best effort. And a strong belief that I have from my uncle is that we cannot reach perfection, but we can surpass our excellence. We can never be all right, but we can always be better and be proud of our effort because we did the best we could at that time with the knowledge that we have. And it's kind of like a quote from Maya Angelou, right? That you do your best until you learn how to do better, and when you know better, you do
Mm-hmm.
better, right? And so that's the whole belief in my thing. I always try to be better. And with the role as referee liaison, I never said, I'm gonna do this one game so I can do a World Cup in
Yeah.
2 days.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Oh, amazing. Well, we have a couple minutes left, so just to kind of get some other questions in the discussion. So you kind of have mentioned a lot of networking, and you've mentioned a couple mentors you have. So how important is mentorship in the counseling type of industry? I mean, even the soccer industry, if you want to touch upon that, like, do you have any mentees? Do you have any mentors that you still work with in your, education career side?
Yeah, as a counselor, and this is a very counselor move on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about 1,000. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 is about 1,000. Mentoring and
Yeah.
mentorship and being a mentee and being a mentor is very, very needed.
Hmm.
You need to have a sample, or you need to have like a path to follow in order for you to create your own style or your own path, right? And so mentors are there to give you those tips and those tricks because they've been there, they've done it. Now is your turn. They're kind of like passing on the baton.
Hmm.
So they can't do the work for you, but they're gonna tell you this is how you get there and follow me, look at what I'm doing, and sort of like take it all in and then adapt it to your needs, and that's what I've done. I wouldn't be here without the support from so many mentors. I would say in counseling, I had Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue was my PSA counselor back when I was um like a student, and it's like I can't pay it back to Mr. Blue, but I can pay it forward to the next
Hmm.
Carlos or to the next Mr. Blue that's coming up, right? And Mr.
Right.
Hernandez, he was another counselor that I had that supported me throughout the way. So in my counseling philosophy and my counseling practices, I sort of like embody them and try to replicate what they did for me, but
Yeah,
I
pay
do
it
it
forward.
in my style, exactly. And in refereeing, I have Mr. Angeles. He was a former FIFA referee, and he was actually the one who called me and said, "Carlos, can you cover this game?" And he trusted in my abilities. And recently, like last week, he posted. I was celebrating, like, I guess, years in this service, and he
Hmm.
said, "I knew that when I recommended you, I knew you would do the best job, and I know that you would have that experience to grow and make it better." And it's really like I call it, like, those pushes, you get like people
The
telling
gentle
you,
nudges.
and you get like, oh, there's motivation. This is like a
Oh,
turbo.
yes,
This is
yes.
like turbo speed. He kind of like gets me more motivated because if my mentor is saying this, like, he can see
Hmm.
the effort that I'm doing. Gio, not my uncle, right? My friend
Yeah,
Gio,
yeah, Theo,
he was
yeah.
definitely that, right? In professional soccer, Mr. Angeles, again, he was the one who mentored me and kind of told me, this is how you do it. Julio, he passed away recently, and I think he will be very proud of what I am. I'm doing a World Cup, and it was thanks to the he showed me the ropes. He showed me how to do things, right? And so I gotta give props to him. And then in soccer, my coach Leo, like, they're just people who sort of like give you this experience that they have, and then you kind of have to be able to learn it and listen, and really pay attention to what they're telling you, because they're doing it. And I don't consider myself a mentor by any means, but over the years, people have come back to me and they said, "Thank you for mentoring me." And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I just
Helping
don't even
people
know you're
apply for
doing it.
college and doing things, that I don't really think about it. Last year I did officially, like, did have a mentee, and I followed up with them. And and I don't think of it like a formal thing. It should be very organic. It should be very,
Yes, yeah.
you reach out to them, they reach out to you, and it should be conversations. It should be like, "Hey, what are you up to?" It shouldn't be like, "Okay, let's check this box. I gave you advice. Let's check this box." No, it should be more.
Yeah, not as transactional, but because you're
Exactly.
also developing that relationship as that mentee mentor, So yeah, very all great advice on that. So we always encourage those. We have our own mentor programs at Cal State Long Beach. So alumni, if they want to pay it forward and give back their time, we have so many students that are always looking for people like yourself to help guide them through their journeys. And so, wrapping up with one more question. You've given so much advice already, but is there any other advice you would give to any 49ers that are interested in making a career in maybe your counseling type of industry and journey?
Not to be an overachiever here, but I do have like at least three that I can give
That's totally fine.
right off the bat. I'm like, well, I already said some of them. I did say that no role is too big or too small for you. I
Hmm.
think that, if you're told to clean, like yesterday, I had combination ceremony for my students. And at the end, it was like, "Can you sweep the seats just to make sure that we don't leave any trash?" And, yeah, maybe it was the coordinator for the combination ceremony, but I don't think that I'm too big to say, "Oh, I can't do that. That's not a
Right.
role that I'm supposed to do." And I just do it. And you just, if you're appointed to a position, you do the best you can, and be proud of your effort, no matter how big or how small the role is. You just perform your role, and just do it to the best of your abilities. Something that I say is integrity, doing the right thing even if no one's watching. And because you never know who is watching, right? Sometimes you
Hmm.
think, oh, I'm just gonna do this and no one's gonna see it. But you need to be integral. You need to, do the right thing. And maybe this is more spiritual, right? Because I believe in God, and my grandma taught me, to read the Bible and the Proverbs and kind of like use that as a way to practice, right? And not just say, oh, I do this. It's like show people who you are.
Hmm.
And not because they're watching you, but just do it all the time because that's gonna be who you are. And the last one is that, be you. There's other people and they're all taken. They all have their own personality, characteristics, characters, right? So you gotta be the same regardless of the location of where you are and regardless of the role that you have. Not because you're the president or because you're the manager or the supervisor, you're above, and then just because you're at the bottom, you see the people above like less. No, we see each other as humans, and
Hmm. Of
be who you
equals.
are. My grandma would say, be Carlos Hernandez in Asia, in Africa, in the US, in Honduras, wherever you're at, be proud of who you are and be you, be authentic, be genuine. And you're not a golden coin to make everybody happy. Sometimes people will like you and some people will not like you, but be direct. I'm very direct and I tell you as it is and how I feel. And sometimes people appreciate that and sometimes people don't. And that's who I am.
That's okay.
And it's okay.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Carlos. This was so much information, and we loved hearing about, your stepping stone experiences as where you got to be where you are as a counselor, but then also just as a referee and, an official and helping support, the FIFA organization and just all those other soccer teams, internationally and locally. So we hope to see you do even greater things in the future. And with that, once again, thank you everyone for attending. You'll be able to visit the alumni website in the weeks ahead to view this recording, as well as see any of our other upcoming virtual events that we have. Please make sure to give the alumni team and Carlos a follow on LinkedIn. It sounds like he is always open to helping mentor more people. And after that, thank you and go Beach.